Okay, hello everybody. My name is Dave Munger, and I'm a librarian with Sacramento Public Library. Welcome to this month's genealogy workshop, Online Maps, Atlases, and Gazetteers for Genealogy, with our speaker, James Baker. Today's session will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel indefinitely. I'll put the link to our YouTube channel in the chat. Again, for questions about future genealogy presentations or to receive a copy of the handout, please email contact@saclibrary.org. I'll also post a copy of the handout to the chat for download. Now, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, James Baker. James M. Baker has been an active genealogist for the past 15 years. He specializes in German, Midwest U.S., early American research, and DNA. He has written articles for the National Genealogical Society magazine, the National Genealogical Society Quarterly, and Der Blumenbaum, the Journal of the Sacramento German Genealogy Society. He has presented numerous webinars and has given many genealogy presentations to different genealogical societies. Mr. Baker earned a PhD in sociology and social psychology from the University of Utah. He is retired from an aerospace and business management career. His presentation today is Online Maps, Atlases, and Gazetteers for Genealogy. James, I'll pass the virtual mic to you now.
Very good, then. I'll push the share screen button and let's see. I think it did it.
Yeah, looks good.
Let's see now. I've got to do something here to be able to go forwards and backwards.
There we go. You're moving through it.
Okay, very good. We'll start from the top. Hello, thank you, Dave, and hello, everyone. Welcome to our today's presentation of the map story. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because genealogists use maps, different kinds of maps, a lot of maps, and I think we just all really like maps. I've put this map up here just to kind of introduce the presentation. I think it's a really handsome multicolored map. Now, it says over here that that's not really true. It's not a 1789 map. It's a map of the world of Europe as of 1789. The map was made sometimes later, but this reflects what we see in the Central Europe during that time period. And I use this for a couple of reasons to introduce the presentation. First of all, to show that it's different today, because as you look at different places on the map, like you kind of recognize that Germany should be in the center here, but you do not see the word Germany anywhere. This is because the land that became Germany consisted in 1789 of many, you see them there, a lot of different entities, you see different republics, electorates, bishoprics, kingdoms, and so on. And there were just so many. In fact, there were probably over 100 different entities covering that territory. And maybe some of the names we recognize that are still true in the present day, some of them have evolved in, like, maybe Bavaria has become one of the German states. Certainly some of these others on the left-hand side, certainly France has continued, as has Switzerland, but a lot of the others have changed. They have grown, the boundaries have moved. And this is what we get very often in different time periods. This means that if you're looking some of your people up from way back when, you've got to know where they lived. And like in this case, they didn't live in Germany. Maybe they lived in Prussia, maybe Bavaria, but it's kind of a tricky way to look things up sometimes. Here's a similar thing, just focusing on what is today Italy, because you see that Italy actually did not become unified until 1861. It had these different bits and pieces. And that's the way not only with Germany, Italy, but a lot of other places. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at maps to find the location data for our ancestors. And the question is, what kind of maps will help the most? There are several different kinds, and we'll try to sample some of the different ones. We want to talk about some of the finding sites because you need to find these records, and you hope to do it conveniently. And we'll have a few case studies along the way. Now, one thing that we have a problem about is defining the right location for our people. Because second bullet, if we get the location wrong, or if we're not as specific as we should be, we can make a lot of mistakes for ourselves and for other people. And so this is why maps become kind of important, and we like them better when they're online, and many of them are. Maybe, I think even most of them. Now here are some typical problems of different location, because maybe we don't know where a certain event occurred. Where were they married? Where was he born? And so we say, well, maybe here, and we take a guess. That doesn't work out so well sometimes. Sometimes we know the name of the place, but are we sure if it's the correct county or even the right country? Because counties had their boundaries move around, and different countries took control of different time periods and different areas. Interesting thing here with the genealogy, I'll call it the rule, and that is the big guys in genealogy tell us to name the place where this event, like a birth or a marriage, took place in the name of the county or the country as it was at the time. If something happened in Virginia in the year 1770, we do not put down that that was in the United States because it was in British colonial America. And a lot of counties, we'll get into that, have had a lot of changed boundaries. So how can maps help? They will help if you can get one for the right year, the right time and place, and then you can identify the county, the country where this event took place. Because the maps, the gazetteers, they're the thing that is maybe number one in terms of being able to correctly identify a particular location. Now, I have an example here for one of my own ancestors who came to America in about 1847. He had lived in Bavaria. And so he and his brother, and they came together to central Illinois. And he was very successful here over the years. He married, he lost his first wife, remarried, had 10 children, and he had property in a couple of different counties. And so to track him and his children, the whole group of them, the maps become very helpful. Now, I know for a fact, because I have a death record, he died in 1896, and he left a lot of Illinois property to his 6 sons. The daughters got cash. Everybody got their fair share. So we'll look at the maps here. Here's a picture of the man and his good wife who gave him those all those children. And we will look at one of the finding sites, Linkpendium, which is really a good genealogy site. Somehow Linkpendium is able to find and identify all of the websites that exist for a particular county or a particular town, a particular spot. And they arrange the site geographically by state and county, and so that's the way we look it up. We're going to look for Illinois, Logan County. So here we are to Linkpendium, where the downward arrow is, that shows the names of all the different states. And so whichever state you're interested in, you click on that one. In this case, we click on Illinois, and then they offer us another opportunity to take a look at different counties. So we scroll down alphabetically to Logan County, click on that, and we look and see Linkpendium knows about 545 different sites that have to do with genealogy in that small county. So we click on that. We now are in Logan County, Illinois, and they have a different bunch of categories here, and they're alphabetical. So here's, if you look on the left and see in the B's, the Bible records, biographies, cemeteries. We'll scroll on down past a number of other records. There's land records, and here we're coming to the maps and gazetteers. They have 54 different sites that fill the bill here. So let's see what they are. So we click on that, and there they have very neatly listed all of those different sites that have to do with maps. A lot of them, most of them have to do with property records. So as I told you, my man, Nicholas Baker, he got there about 1850 or so. He actually went to Mason County first, and then he thought Logan County would be better, I guess. So he moved over to Logan County. So we're going to look for some fairly early county records. So looking on the left, you see there's a year marked for each of those different maps. The bottom two left-hand arrows, they're important because we're seeing now that there's one that goes all the way back to 1846. That's about when the county was established. So he got in almost on the ground floor. Notice the downward arrow, that shows that some of these maps, the sites, you've got to pay for, because that's what the dollar sign means. We've just clicked on one that is going to tell us about maps for the year 1873. So by now, the county is pretty well, the property sold, people are moving in. And so this is one of the states, of which there's about 30 of them, that are organized by township. And so here we have some of our good people there. The bottom left-hand arrow says N. Baker, that's Nicholas Baker, and it shows that he has a certain amount of acreage. And then just above that, another of my relatives, Carl Paulus, his daughter and a son of Nicholas Baker, they got married way back in the 1800s. So, and then there are some others where I put the arrow, and they are other relatives of mine. This one you can see better. I kind of blew up that part there that says here is where Carl Paulus's place was, and here's Nicholas Baker, and this is 1873. These are known as cadastral maps because the tax people like to use them, because it just identifies perfectly where everybody lives and owns the land. I didn't get all of that. That's only the top half of the county. Here's the bottom half. And so here's some more people that I have connections with. A township, we see this all through the Midwest. There are 30 different states that play the township game, and they have standardized it pretty well. On a township is 6 by 6, that's 6 miles across, 6 miles down, and so however many townships there will be. So notice the right-hand arrow shows that this township is almost, well, it's more than almost, it's actually got a piece of the city of Lincoln. Lincoln's not a very large city, about 13,000 people. Here's a picture of a map of the entire county, and you see that the townships are arranged very nicely. So wherever you've got people, you can find them in their particular township. And if you have those nice maps that tell who owned what property, you can immediately identify, just where they are on the map. So again, part of this atlas, the Atlas and Gazetteers, they've got more than just a map. Sometimes they'll have a lot of other information, and this one does. And so here we see where the arrows are, that they're showing that they've got some photos. Even though it's of 1873, there were some early photos taken of some residences. This top one got my name because I have an uncle who married one of the Baker girls, and his name was Beaver. So I know that these are his people in that first group. And then Nicholas Baker is in the second group. So we will look at some pictures of their homesteads. This is one that was connected to my uncle's people. And notice that even though these are very early days in Logan County, these people were living pretty well. Look at that nice big house with at least 4 different fireplaces. You can see them, and you can see their livestock and a barn, some fruit trees, and so on. This is another one, another house that belonged to my uncle's people. And so again, you see these people had large families, and so I think they needed good sized houses. And again, there's the barns and other outbuildings. Here's the one I'm more interested in, because this is the place where my ancestor Nicholas Baker lived, and that would be, what, 150 years ago. So notice again that it's a nice big house. It's got fireplaces, fruit trees. I think they must have somehow posed that picture, because they've got those different horses and carriages and people riding around on the horses. So, but however they took the picture, there it is, and that's the way it was. I thought this was interesting to see how this family was living in 1873 in central Illinois. So these land plat maps show exactly who lived where and how you get the feel for how they are related to other family members. And so this particular map showed the locations of the families who they were getting married to one another. They lived near one another. And when the children came of age, sometimes they would be given a piece of property nearby. So this time we've moved up to the year 1910. Nicholas is dead. And so we're now going to think about his 6 sons. And so right there about the center, in the center section, where it says the big number 17, there's 17, 16, 15. For 17, see Joseph Baker, that's my grandfather. And there's his brother August, another brother Theo. Jump up one line ahead and bop over to the right, and there you see Nicholas Baker. And if you turn your head sideways, there's Louis Baker. And then my other relatives, the Pauluses, they're right up there. Louis Paulus, the son, has been given some property. And there's Charles Paulus, the father. And so this is kind of interesting to be able to track people and see who owned the land, where did they live, and so that's what we get with those nice land plat property type maps. Lincoln and Logan County were fairly new at the time that Nicholas got there. Lincoln had been it was only established in 1853. It has, second bullet, kind of a distinct thing that they like to boast about. This town was the first town that was ever named after Abe Lincoln, and it was named after him when he was not yet the president. In fact, he was, at that time, among other things, he was a lawyer for the railroad company that would later become beneficial to the town. The railroad was so beneficial that this is really what caused the town of Lincoln to grow. Initially, it was not even the county seat, but in short time, it was. So Nicholas was not among the really earliest settlers, but he was not far behind because this was really kind of a new area. I want to go back further in time now. On my mother's side of the house, I have some relatives who were in Preston, Connecticut, and they were involved. They got in on the ground floor. They were in the early settlement of that town. Thomas Tracy is the name of one of the founders, and you see the names of at least 3 other families that are all ancestors of mine. I was looking for a nice map, much like I showed you for Illinois, but back that far in time, I just couldn't find one. So I did find kind of a small book that had some maps, and I'll show you that map. And this is, sometimes you get better maps than others. And so this is not a super map, but around 1700, this is the way Preston, Connecticut was laid out. And somebody had gone to the trouble of figuring out who owned the property in different locations. And so here you see the upper arrow there where it points to Preston City. That's, I guess, the major part of town. But when you add up everybody who lived there, there were only about 80 different family homes in the whole town. And then kind of a smaller, different community off to the lower left, but they've counted those as well. And then I've noted here that I have ancestors. I put small, in fact, they're so, the blue arrows are so faint you can hardly see them, but that's where there are 4 different locations there. So it's kind of interesting again to see where your people lived and what kind of property they owned at a particular period of time. Here's one of my ancestors whose name is Tyler. He's a blacksmith, and he moved there in 1698. He was an interesting guy. Well, really, his wife was interesting because she and 3 of the daughters, when they lived in Massachusetts, they had been accused and locked up and put on trial for witchcraft. They were among the lucky people who survived, but I think there was good reason why Tyler took his family and moved out of Massachusetts and moved over to a new place, because that's what he did just a few years after the witch trial. So this small book had the pictures and descriptions and a few words about all these different families and different people. So again, it was kind of like a gazetteer. Here's one of the bigger, nicer houses in town, and that's a pretty nice place for Connecticut in the year 1800. So let's move on and talk about what are the best maps for us. Well, I've shown you some land plat maps. They're good to pin down the time and place. Where did the people live, or at least who owned the property? And then if you can get into a gazetteer, they're going to give you more information, maybe some stories and pictures, and then maybe some of these early historic maps will be useful because they'll tell you at that time exactly how did the people draw the map, how did they see it. And so then we're going to talk about the boundary changes too. Let's go to Family Search because we're going to look at the wiki, because their world of the wiki is something that's always useful. So you click on search, and within that you find we're going to look at the wiki, and you know that that's kind of an encyclopedia of everything there is in the world of genealogy. So I have put in the name United States Maps because that's what I want them to tell me about. And they do have a category in that wiki. It's a very detailed wiki. It's kind of like what you'd get a page in an encyclopedia, and it's going to tell you where to look, what there is, what kinds of data there are, what kinds of maps. And so we'll want to look more in that article. Well, instead of scanning through and looking at the whole thing, I've pulled out the 13 items that I want to tell you about, and this is the direction we're going in the next few minutes. We've already kind of introduced the topic of atlases and historical atlases and things like that. And then we're going to jump in very soon and talk about boundary change maps. The ones that are marked in red are the ones I'm going to talk more about, because the others, they may have some value, but mostly they're not going to tell you so much about the people. They will tell you more about the area and things like that. So among those, we're going to have 13 different categories. So as I said, the first ones we've kind of already introduced, atlases, and they are so important, and especially the historical ones, that I'll want to say a few more words about them, and likewise the boundary change maps. Census maps, you may remember just a few years ago when we were getting information on the 1950 census. The rule is you get the data 72 years after. So a couple of years ago, we were very interested in getting that. And you may know and remember that Steve Morse is the guy who used census maps to help you identify where did your ancestor live in the census. And so he even was able to do that before we had the full array of an every name kind of a census routine. So those census maps were kind of good at that time. I think mostly though now we're beyond that as far as finding our people in the census. There are some other kind of maps, number 4 and 5, that nice maps, they show streets and courthouses and a lot of other odds and ends, but they're not, shall I say, individual people oriented. So the atlases, gazetteers, these are helpful sometimes when we need to go back in time and we find that our particular village or town, we can't find it. Maybe it was small, maybe it's been absorbed into the larger community. And sometimes these atlases will give you that kind of information. So different collections. One of them, whenever we talk about the world of maps, there's always the David Rumsey collection. I think this has been his thing in life, to accumulate literally hundreds of thousands of maps, and they're all parts of the world, all time periods. We'll look at some of his. Historic maps works, there's a lot of them, and some of them really go back in time. There are different universities that have different collections, and some are paired with others. Then there are the different foreign collections. Now, I'm particularly interested in the German side of things, so I'm going to be interested in the German book, the big gazetteer called the Myers Orts. Orts is a word for villages or towns. So ancestry, sometimes good souls that they are, this time they put this book on its site for free. You don't even have to be a member of Ancestry to look at this. And it's really a kind of a lucky thing. The book was published in 1912. It's got information about every town, village, hamlet, whatever is smaller than a hamlet, and it's got it all. And this also happens for a time period when Germany was at its largest size, and so it takes in a very large area. As an example here, I have a death record that I found in the local parishes that said Jacob Martin was born in Hecht, and he was baptized in another place nearby. Well, I could not find on Google Maps or MapQuest this place called Hecht, but Myers Orts knew about it because in 1912 you could find it. It's now been absorbed into the larger community. So second one here, an ancestor's marriage records showed her being from a place called Tennenmoos, but none of the modern maps had it, but Myers Orts did. So here I've got a question about my Heuchelheim people. I want to know where they went to church, because that's where you're going to find the parish records. And this gazetteer has detailed records for every little town and village, and even the ones that are now in Poland or the Alsace-Lorraine group that are now in France. So I pump in the name of Heuchelheim. You see the top arrow, Heuchelheim #1. Oh, that means there's more than one town named Heuchelheim. So I look at #2, 3, 4. I think there were about 6 of them. Well, #2 happens to be the one I'm interested in, because when I see the nearby, kind of like the county seat equivalent, I know which one that is. Here is something really good. That's why I've given it 5 stars. This is called, the site is the Myers Gaz for gazetteer.org. So here that some people have put together this, and it's a free site. It's got all the good information. So I pump in that data, and we're going to go there to their site, Myers Gaz. So there's the opening page. I'll put in Heuchelheim. And so let's see what they can tell me. Well, one thing they've done is that they've translated things out of that old German, and I don't have to look at that not very popular typeface that they use in Myers Orts. So, and they know about the different towns named Heuchelheim. I pick the right one and I click on that, and then they start telling us about it. But the one thing that I want to know is, where did they go to church? And so down there near the bottom where the arrow is, it says that in Heuchelheim, there is one church. It is the evangelical. And so that's the Protestant church. And so this time I'm still in that nice site. And so notice at the top that there are different categories here of different ways to look at it. Right now we're looking at the map, but then also we will look at what they call the ecclesiastical category. And then later on the upper right, you'll see that we'll toggle that kind of an interactive thing there. But for now, looking at the map, here's Heuchelheim right in the center. And I recognize the names of some other towns because some of my people either got married to others who lived in nearby towns. And so there's some of them there in Mortsheim and Billigheim, Ingenheim, all those different heims. So this time I've clicked on ecclesiastical because this says, where are the local Catholic churches and Protestant and even Jewish? And so you see there that Heuchelheim, we already had learned that it has one Protestant church. It doesn't have a Catholic church. This was important for me because I knew my people were Catholic. And so that meant they had to go to a nearby town. But on the chart here, it tells how far those other towns were. They're not very far. See some of them 1 mile, 2 miles. And so, in other words, you can, if you're a Catholic, it's no great hardship to go to the other town. So this time, I'm going to do that toggle routine, and I'm going to click. I have about 5 different choices. I'm going to click on the one that says Catholic parishes and churches. And so marked in yellow, all of a sudden here, the neighboring towns with their Catholic churches come up. I could have also taken a look to see which ones had Protestant churches, but to see that this site really works well. Now let's look for a German village, and let's go way back to the year 1673, because that was when it happened for me, that when the ancestor was in this village named Tennenmoos. And I know that it is in the German state of Baden, and I know it must have been near Gornhofen because that's where the couple got married. Now, maybe again, this town was so small that it has either been absorbed or disappeared. But I look at Google Maps and it's got Gornhofen, it's got Bodnegg. They're about 4 miles apart. It does not have Tennenmoos, and such a nice name. So I go to the Myers Ort, and they know about Tennenmoos because it was there in the year 1912. So now I go to the map, and here, lower left, you see not only Tennenmoos, but Ober and Under. They're like the people who lived on the hill and the ones who lived down below. And they're both different versions of the village of Tennenmoos. And then also notice, remember the story of Hecht, that Hecht did not appear on the modern maps, but here it is. And you see that it's very near Bodnegg, and in fact has now been absorbed into Bodnegg. Let's go to the Rumsey maps because they have got so many of them, a big collection. So we put in the name Baden because that's where Tennenmoos is. And so we'll see what we can find. So each entry has its own area. So where the blue arrows are at the top, we're going to search in Baden, and we're going to look for the year 1850. And so with good luck, I've got a map. I found a map. It says that that's what it's for. And indeed, it's very similar to that other kind of a map that we had for 1912. I think it must have been the same company that made the maps. But see, again, lower left, there's Tennenmoos, and there's these other villages, Bodnegg and Gornhofen. There is a great big map, I guess I'll call it a collection. The Karte that's translated, that's the maps of the German Empire, 1893. It's part of the Rumsey package. It's online, and they number their maps from all the way to 674. That means they've got so much detail for this whole big area of Germany. They've split it into some 600 pieces. And so here I look, and here once again, Gornhofen, Hecht, the ones that I had before. And again, you sort of feel like maybe the same company was making some of those maps. Here's a different company, a different nation. This is a French map, the year 1772. And where the upper arrow is, there's Heuchelheim. And there we have other towns, Klingen, Munster. This time it's spelled with a C. And then up above, they're spelling Merzheim a little different. And you can, Billichheim, they're spelling different too. So they're kind of converting it to their own French lingo. Here is a 1750 map, again, a French map. And this shows my people in Merzheim. So you see Heuchelheim just a short distance below that. And I was interested in this map because this is the time period 2 years later that this guy, my ancestor who lived in Merzheim, went, it was about a 10-mile jaunt over to Gossersweiler, and that's where his bride was. He got married there, but he took her back and they lived in Merzheim. But see, that's about a 10-mile jaunt, so it might have been a little more difficult to do his courting in that time period. We have a collection of maps called Old Maps Online. And they have an easy way to find old maps. They've got thousands of them. They have access to the Rumseys too. And it's really user-friendly. You just put in your submission, like first of all, we're going to Old Maps Online. And here are some choices. Well, this time I'll pick a German map. And one of my early towns there is named Gottelsheim. So that's kind of just up the way from Frankfurt, about 80, 90 miles up the road. It was in the kingdom of Waldeck. So here on the right-hand side, we see the Waldeck Comitatus, then kind of a medieval word that translates to county or area. So we're going to see what they've got for Waldeck. So on the right side, they've listed about 100 different maps. And the one where I put the arrow, that's 1585. So here I clicked and it said, yeah, you want to look at it? Yes. And so I click, I'm going to have to enlarge it. But I was really impressed with this because look, there's a map that it's absolutely hand drawn very carefully. And here where the arrow is in the center, there's Gottelsheim. there's, for 1585, some of these towns, villages have slightly different spellings. Down the way, another one of my towns, Veermunden, whichever way you want to say it. And and I like this business of how they've kind of drawn the hills like as if they're really mountains. They're not really that all a mountain, but you get the idea of the kind of landscape there is. And they've marked the rivers down and things like that. I think pretty good for a 1585 map. Well, whatever country you're doing business with, there are gazetteers, there are historic map collections. And this also applies to all the different US states or counties. I've made a special note about Jewish Gen because they have really good details for their towns and villages, a lot of landmarks and things like that. So they're very good in Germany, and a lot of other gazetteers do not have all that. We're going to get into some boundary change material. Second bullet there, it said that one man's ancestor lived in the same place. He never moved, yet he lived in 5 different counties. Well, the thing that happens is that the one county gets changed, it gets divided, it gets added or subtracted. And so, but the trick is to find the right records. It's tricky because you got to say, well, what county was it at that time? Where are the records? And so that applies to the property records, marriages, and other things. There are 3 really good sites that all do the same thing. They all deal with these boundary changes. And so I've used the Map of US group. I could have used Newberry, I could have used the other one. But here's an example of going to the state of Massachusetts. And I'm looking there in 1643. And so that's the earliest one they've got. And so you see that all they know for Massachusetts, all they've got are people in the New Plymouth colony. Well, they've kind of marked off the next couple of counties, and maybe there's some people, few of them that are kind of getting into those counties. But I want you to look across the bottom at all those different years. Every one of those, some county had a boundary change, and that just went on and on and on. Some of it you'd hardly believe. There must be 100 different entries there. So let's bump it up to 1658. So now we're getting a few more people, a few more items. So now we're up to 1668. So now we even have names for different counties. They're in the upper half is the Massachusetts, and then in that lower left, you see that there's where my Connecticut people are coming in New London and New Haven and so on. 1707, see now more people, more counties, more changes, and we get Providence this time, the Providence Plantation, the Rhode Island group, and we're getting more things, more divisions of counties. Now we're all the way up to 1862, and now you can see that the entire states of Massachusetts and the others are blanketed with their different counties. We're jogging down here now to the state of New York. The year is 1683, but all we've got in New York, way down at the bottom, that's New York City, and you see Long Island, and then up the Hudson, there's a few settlements, a few people, but nothing much really, and hardly anybody way up there in upper New York State. And here's one of the maps This is even as late as 1773. And see, that whole upper left is just marked Indian lands. None of our settlers have gone there yet in the state of New York. So now it's just a year or two later. This is after the Revolutionary War. The Indians of that group, of that area, got on the wrong side of the colonists, and within short order, the colonists were moving into those areas. So here we get Montgomery County, and then just a couple years later, here is now Ontario County, and people are going to move there. And as time, it's just a few more years, 1796, but now here's a whole bunch of counties that have been carved out, and there will be more over the next few years, so that by the time 1860, I think the whole state is pretty well covered. So we're back to our list, and so I have number 3, 4, 5, but not much for those people. So now we're moving on here to different kinds of maps, the city and town locator, the city maps. They're not going to help us much, but number 8 and 9, the county maps, the fire insurance maps, we'll look at those. So here's county, parish, and province maps. So I showed you one for Logan County earlier, and these maps usually have enough detail to tell us what we need to know about our people and where they're located within a county, because all the states have counties or their equivalent, and many of them are divided in either in townships or some other kind of unit. In the Midwest and nearby, it is easy because the townships are a standard size, and for purposes of land ownership, they've got a similar scorekeeping system. We didn't have that in the early states, and there was really no good way to shift over. We're going to talk about how to find some of those good sites, and there are different. We've talked about a few of them already, but we'll go some more. Linkpendium we have already introduced, and so like I showed you how we use that to find maps in different areas. This was Logan County. If we wanted to go and look for Sacramento County, look at that. Linkpendium knows about a lot of sites for Sacramento County. We could entertain ourselves a long time with those. Cindy's list, with all of its collection of many types of genealogy data for anything and everything, includes maps. And it is not only the US, the Linkpendium was strictly USA, but Cindy's list is worldwide. They've got over 800 maps that they know about, and it is particularly good for international data. Good old Google even has a place to go for maps. You go into the upper right-hand corner and click there, and then within images, you put maps, and you're going to get all kinds of information. They've got a map for just about everything you want. And so let's be more specific. Let's say what we want to get for Logan County. So good old Logan County. It's a small county, but they've got 200 different maps. And you see a good number of them that are shown there. And so you can kind of get an idea of what you want to see in that county. Some advantages of Google Maps, they're free. And now a lot of them, we maybe don't consider them to be genealogy maps, but they can be very useful for a genealogist. So with Google, you go to maps, you put in a few keywords, and you probably get what you need. Here are some fun maps. I call them fun maps because it shows, like in the upper left map, when California was an island. See that whole all that big bunch of water there. It's kind of like the second one from the left is that way too. These are very early maps. So now can Google find these historic maps? Sure they can. You know that they can find most anything. So third bullet, we're going to look now for the Baden group. So here we are, we're looking for the Baden people, the year 1750. And so there's about 100 maps that Google knows about. Now, a little glitch, and you know about the world of copyright, and maybe you've got to pay for some of them, but they'll tell you about them at least. And they know about the Rumsey collection also. Google Maps, there's a guy named Randy Majors that has done some really good things with Google and the maps. And so he has developed some special tools for that. And we like them because they're free. And they have different kinds of US county capabilities. And they maybe go together sometimes with the boundary change maps. So here I've gone to Randy's site. I'm going to Randy's site, and you see where the left-hand arrow is. It's going to tell you about the historic US counties. And so then you get a number of choices. And so you can see it does a lot of different things. I'm going to do the boundary change now, because here is my ancestor, Jonathan Tracy Jr. He lived in New Jersey. He says in the US Census that he was born in New Jersey in 1771. So see the left-hand arrow, he's born in kind of near a little village there named Unionville. I hope you can see that very near the arrow. That's right in the middle of Sussex County. And notice over on the right, there's Orange County, but it's in a different state. It's in New York. Sussex is in New Jersey. Bergen County is also in New Jersey. But that's the way it was. See the top arrow, that's the year 1773. And see, my person's born 1771. Now we've moved it up just 1 year later, 1774. But look where the blue arrow is and see where Unionville has moved. Well, Unionville didn't move, but the boundary moved. And so now this family is living in Orange County, New York, because within that 1 year period, somewhere a change was made, and Orange County, New York picked up a fair chunk of territory from New Jersey. This situation happens frequently, and maybe it has happened in some of your cases. And I know it's kind of one of those things that you've got to really kind of double check. Sometimes you can use Family Search as a finding site because they've got different wiki articles. We looked at the one for United States maps, but if you look at another one, maybe Illinois maps, maybe for a particular county, and you go to the catalog. So the Family Search, I go to the wiki page for Logan County, and I move down there to maps. Well, turns out they don't have much. So sometimes the wiki is better than other times. This time we're working with Sacramento County, and where the blue arrow is, see, they've got about 7 or 8 different sites. And so that can be kind of good. But I think we found that certain other sites had maybe more information. Now we're on Ancestry, and of course, that's where we spend half of our time. And so we go do the search for everything, search all, and then down there where the blue arrow is, you can see there is a category for maps, atlases, and gazetteers. We click on that and we kind of work in that area. Now, I've had a little bit of trouble finding things there on Ancestry, and eventually I found some of them, but just as a caution, I've found that Ancestry in this area, the map area, they're just not as user-friendly as we're accustomed to. On MyHeritage, if you are working on that site, you go to the research and click, you scroll down, and again, you see they have a bunch of maps. And so once again, you go to the map category, you put in certain keywords, and maybe you'll get what you want on MyHeritage. I wanted to introduce you to the Digital Public Library of America. This has been especially good to find the world of books that are online that you can access for free. They also have a certain number of maps, a lot of maps. And so that might be a place where if you can't find the map without paying for it, maybe the Digital Public Library has it. A new category here, the fire insurance, the Sanborn maps. Time was that the Sanborn Company had a monopoly on the market of working with insurance companies, and regularly they published and republished and updated, sometimes at an interval of maybe every 2 years for many towns, 12,000 towns, like they covered the country. And then after about 1970, there were just maybe too many other options to find out what's going on with those locations and the insurance. But if you want to dip back in time and look at a particular community, you should be able to find what they have there. Because it will give you a detailed look at all the streets and buildings in town, tell you what size they are. It does, however, have limited data on the people who live there. They're just mostly interested in showing you each piece of property. So you can imagine that it's what the insurance company wanted. Well, I grew up in Detroit, so I was kind of interested in looking at the Detroit map, and that's where I saw that it seemed like they were republishing it every couple of years. I'm not sure if it's a good example to look at, though, because it is so urbanized, but I'm going to show you better maybe in a smaller town. So we're back to Logan County, Illinois, and so Lincoln itself, well, it had still 12,000 people, so I want to look at a smaller town. Mount Pulaski has maybe 1,500 people. So, but nevertheless, Sanborn knows about it and has done business with it. So here is the story of the Sanborn group for Mount Pulaski. So here is Mount Pulaski, and on the right-hand side, you see kind of an interesting phenomenon. Here it looks like this is the county building, like the county courthouse. And indeed, that's what it was way back in about 1852. It was the original county seat for Logan County. A few years later, it got bumped and Lincoln became the county seat. And so Mount Pulaski never ever grew to be much larger. And so indeed, but they still have that piece of land there where you see that's where the courthouse would be, and nothing else is on that particular block. Now you go across the street, across Washington Street on the left, and you see there's all the buildings that front on that street. You see the respective size of each one or what they're built for. And then, of course, if we wanted to, we could scroll up or jog up and look at the residential community of the town. But this is what you get with the nice Sanborn maps. Just a few more categories, but they're kind of smaller, less important categories. Well, not entirely, because one of them is the land ownership, but I think we've already kind of covered that one in our first examples of the different land plats and all those things, because they are really good, showing the names of the owners, the acreage, and so on. And then that's where we talked about the townships and how you divide the state, you divide the county into townships, and each one is a 6x6. Some of them will vary a little bit, depending on the geography, but by and large, we're going to get the 36 square miles, and they're all divided into subsections. There is a standardized way that people have grown so that they know exactly how to count each township, each one of those 6x6 areas. So in the center, kind of in green, you see you see that plat there that is a 6x6, and it starts counting on the upper right. Number 1 going across to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you turn around and go back to area number 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. And it's always that same way. And then they also show you how they cut up and divide and describe each one of the smaller pieces. It's a standardized numbering system. So if you ever find where exactly does your ancestor live, you can find it. The last categories on the list, there are some military maps. And if you have Civil War ancestors or maybe Revolutionary War ancestors, maybe you want to go back and look at those areas and see who lived nearby or something like that. Some of those maps are greatly detailed. There are railroad maps that show how the place was getting settled over the years. There's the topographic maps that show the mountains, the streams, the terrain, and a lot of those, but they are not much with people. So in the present day, we have our GPS, we have Google Maps, we can find things anywhere in the world very well. I have a category here that I didn't know where to put, so here is a bonus category, and they're the migration routes, and it didn't seem to fit anywhere else, but whether it's the old country or it's in the US. Now, like with the German thing, I have a German class that I teach that deals with migrations and where those people came from. The first wave of the German emigration came almost totally from this one area of Southwest Germany. The others just did not do their fair share of offering people for that migration. Later on, second wave, it was a very different migration pattern. Within America, there are also different kinds of migration routes. So typically, if we had Germans, they went down the Rhine, and then they got on the boat in Rotterdam, they went to Philadelphia, and then they went maybe mostly to Pennsylvania, but also some other places. Over the years, there were migration routes that that went south from Philadelphia, and you can see the map of how there are at least about 4 different ones. And over time, those different routes kind of grew, and one of them was given the name the Great Wagon Road, and it became very popular and went all the way down to Charlotte and beyond. And that was a very common path for settlers to take, the ones heading way down to the Carolinas. We have come to our conclusions. We've talked about the major benefit. One major benefit is to find the right location, the right name, and especially for old time villages, maybe the village is not even there today. And so then it's the changed boundary story, which is more important than we might think. Then the land ownership maps are kind of important. We had a lot of those. And then the gazetteers, the atlases, they just have all kinds of extra records. The boundary change maps for different counties showed that those counties just kept growing and changing changing land from one county to another, one state to another. The land ownership maps, they're good. And we talked about different other map sites and Linkpendium as the finder of maps. We talked about the wiki article, and we could have looked at other wiki articles for different counties or states. Remember Google and have fun with your maps. I'm going to click on the stop share and we'll talk.
Well, thank you, Jim. That was a lot of really good resources there, and I can see that they're really well reflected in your handout also. We have a couple of questions already. And I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves to ask questions also. There we go. Okay, so our first question was someone was asking what the name of the website that you gave 5 stars to was, and I thought it was myersgaz.org, but I'm not sure. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's on the handout.
Yeah, that seemed like a really useful site. And then the next question was, where do you recommend looking for railroad maps?
What kind of maps?
Railroad.
I just don't have a good answer to that one. I've not played that much with railroad maps. And I don't really remember if there was a specific good place to look. Now, I'm not totally bereft of having looked at them, because sometimes I'll look and say, why did my person get married in the state of Kansas in 1853? And then you say, was there a railroad that was out there at that time? So I can see that occasionally, you can find something that's kind of useful there, but as I say, I just haven't played with them that much to give a good answer.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Here's another question. Can you provide further info about your class on German migration routes?
Only that this is a 1-hour class, and it talks about how the Germans, the focus is who came from where and where did they go in the first wave and also in the second wave, and how about the dispersion, the migrations of Germans, not only to the US, but all over the world. And so this is a 1-hour class.
Okay. Who has another question? And you're welcome to ask your questions in your own voice as well, in chat or with audio. I know I saw a lot of websites that I'm definitely going to use myself. Oh, Ann Burroughs. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave, I think we ought to sign him up for that German one.
Oh, that would be an interesting one. Okay. I'll make a note of that. German migration
Right.
class. I was thinking about signing him up for the for a properties a tracing properties class,
Oh,
property records.
uh-huh. That would be a good one too. If any class he has would be good.
I agree. Kate McKeachin, go ahead.
Hi, actually, I just wanted to thank you a lot. I've been running up against a few kind of hiccups in my genealogy, and I didn't honestly think that some of the answers might be found in some of these maps. So I really appreciate the breadth that you suggested today, because although I had thought of some of them, I had really not thought of some of the others that you mentioned today. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome.
I'm going to go ahead and post the handout again for some people. Okay, anyone else have a question while I'm posting this? Here we go. Okay, there's the handout again, and this is where to go to view the recording, and also where to email to get a copy of the handout if you were unable to download it. Any more questions? Don't be shy. Oh, there we go. There's the. Okay, don't be shy. This is our chance to ask some good questions. Yes, Hannelore. I think you're still muted, Hannah.
I'm on my laptop.
Ah,
I
there
don't know
we
how
go.
to do this.
Now we hear you.
Know if I wanted to know if the Myers Ortsverzeichnis, if it covers the previous German lands in Czechoslovakia and Poland.
It was a lucky genealogy situation that it was 1912 that they put the Myers-Orts book together. Now, I say that it was lucky because that was the time when it was just absolutely the largest time for the German Empire. So much of what is now Poland today was included, and certainly good parts of Czechoslovakia, and also on the western side, the Alsace-Lorraine group. So so that 1912 was, it's just, the genealogist couldn't have picked a better time to have all those different groups.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay, while we're waiting for our next question, I'm going to get in my shameless plug. Next month, March 23rd, again on a Saturday at 1 o'clock, we are going to have genealogical resources at the Center for Sacramento History as our presentation. Kim Hayden will be giving that. She's with the Center for Sacramento History, and that is just a great resource for doing local history and local genealogy. So who has another question? Anyone? Hey, do you have any final parting words, James?
I just want to thank everyone who participated, and hope you got something good out of that, and you'll be able to, really will be able to have some good fun looking at those maps.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Jim, and I know I'm going to make some good use of the resources that you've shared with us. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I always enjoy these presentations. Anyone have a last question? Last chance. Okay, well, we will see you all next month. Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Jim.